Well, Scotty Boy Mendelson is at it again, but he's coming to you from a whole new place. That's right, in a brand spanking new article from The Wrap in their Pro section. Woo-hoo-hoo. Scotty goes on a strange apology tour. Well, no, it's not actually an apology tour per se. Maybe it's I'm sorry I broke up with you. I don't know. There's just a lot here to dissect. Actually, maybe we should call it like an excuse fest. Regardless of the nomenclature that we could use here or we would assign to any of this, he's taking the time to look over some numbers and some charts here, which I'm a fan of numbers and charts, as to, well, to determine whether or not China is still relevant to Hollywood. Kind of a strange question or point of analysis. What's going on? I mean, what is everybody thinking here? I don't know. Let's take a look. This is a good one. Here we go. So, a ton of films have been skipping China of late. And again, that's not entirely accurate. China has actually been rejecting a ton of films lately, at least US-based films, and especially if they have the Disney brand in any way on them. Anything coming from Disney is not exactly getting the, thumbs up from the Chinese regulators right now. And, I guess you can't blame China. They just don't like what Disney's peddling. The once great entertainment capital of the world, Hollywood, has gone super soft of late. And I think it's serving up the less than satisfying audience flash and dazzle and replaced it with the scent of soy, leaking from every pore of every frame and wafting up into the rafters of a once great theatrical enterprise. Let's call it a hint of male feminist or vapid howl of the SJW brainlet. Thank you, Eric July. And as those two things are equally entertaining, there's just not a lot there for the rest of us. That's a bit hyperbolic. I will say that whatever's being peddled right now, it just doesn't drive the gears of China any longer. And now that I think about it, it really isn't doing much for the American film goers at the moment, but we'll get to that next week, probably on Monday. The truly successful films by Hollywood financial standards right now in this country, or anywhere else at this point in time, are few and far between, especially if you adjust for inflation. Because let me tell you, nothing is measured up absent maybe Top Gun Maverick for quite some time. It seems like there's only one film a year, and the previous year was Spider-Man No Way Home. But once again, Hollywood's soft. As usual, I've ventured quite far afield of the original topic, so I apologize for the, rant. Yeah, that's what it was. But, well, maybe you'll forgive me because Scotty Boy Mendelson doesn't exactly resonate with a whole lot of masculinity and strength in the way he reports things. And yet, again, I'll plod on and get past it all. But what Scott thinks here is that China may or may not be a market worthy of pursuit for Hollywood. Okay. Kind of vague, but we'll keep going. Hollywood has already handed over the keys on how to operate in the entertainment industry. They've basically been provided a roadmap, and this was done through a less than subtle means called force transfer, which is a technique, as I've described here before, that China has incorporated and utilized on much of American industry. It's not just, obviously focused on entertainment. It's spread far and wide. Technology, etc., etc. And they've used this very effectively over the course of the last couple of decades as American investment in in China, in that foreign land, has allowed them to essentially seize industry assets and IP and trade secrets and all of that. But be that as it may, the idea that Hollywood doesn't need China is almost laughable, because Hollywood made it all but required because of the last decade, or at least it seemed that way. And it was done in large part by pandering and catering to a Chinese audience in a subtle and at times not so subtle way. I mean, who can forget the great thanks that were offered to the slave camp authority in the credits for Mulan? I'll never forget it. And by the way, that was courtesy of Bob Iger's Disney, folks. Don't let him forget it. For the first time in a bit, Disney's actually getting its foot in the door with a very significant film because of their acquisition of Fox and the assets that are controlled by it, Lightstorm. And of course, I'm referring to Avatar: The Way of Water, which, interestingly enough, and I do give Scotty credit for this, he correctly identifies the original film as the jumping off point for the whole China is an untapped box office force thing. It's true. As Scotty sees it, this is China's make or break it moment, because China needs to show that they're worth making films for and distributing films to. The article actually goes out of its way to quote a ComScore analyst by the name of Paul Garabedian. I think I got the name right. And he said, China must again show it can generate the kind of box office horsepower that will grab a studio's attention and make the country an essential destination for their blockbuster films. That's a heck of a sentence, and a run-on sentence at that. And, well, Paul, China doesn't have to do anything. Films will succeed or fail there based on whether they are actually allowed to be in the country, and they're granted preferential treatment in the social credit scoring system. And on top of that, China doesn't want the myopic pandering garbage that gets foisted on the American audience at every turn. So if you want China to take your film and make it successful, you have to make a good film with no agenda and a great story. The only kind of agenda they'll accept there is a pro-China one, if you want to hit that bar. But to be fair, there's a bit of validity in some of the things that are in this article, this part of the article, and from Paul himself. It's just balanced on what I've just said, the last part, which is you have to make a compelling film with a good story, no agenda, and not anything that offends China. The fact is, the numbers bear out the truth of it all, and they always have when it comes to China. And the minute the political pandering garbage went full speed into Hollywood films, and I think we can all see, the China box office numbers went for a bit of a slide. Not a lot at first, but it built up to, well, a pretty deep dip. In 2017, mind you, this is the date that everybody's going to focus on, the box office heyday for China netted about $3.3 billion in total take. Now, that's a gross number. It's not what Hollywood took home because China keeps a giant chunk of the box office. And starting in 2017, well, actually, even before that, starting in 2012, China ramped up its own production, which, basically took advantage of partnerships for 5 years with the studios that they would essentially they would mimic. That's the right word. Studios they would mimic. They're mocking now, but they would mimic doing some quick back of the napkin math, 5 years of production time from 2012 starts their own high quality production. 3.3 billion, high point downward. I think it's safe to say that China has built out its own industry full of a complete production cycle at 5 years. 2018 actually begins the slide proper from the high point in 2017. And it's not substantial, like $100 million off the previous year or so. But that's just the beginning, because 2019 was the biggest Hollywood box office in history. China was already down $500 million, less than 2017. Of course, the global crisis started at the end of 2019. All bets were off on a small rise as things opened up across the globe in various places, including China, the Chinese holidays hit. China falls to its lowest levels of contribution for Hollywood box office in decades. Not a decade, decades. They spent about $337 million on Hollywood box office. It's about $100 million in take home for Hollywood. That's not enough rain in the bucket. Now, there was a small bump in 2021 for both Hollywood and China, which again was defeated a little bit later. It fell back to about 360 million. So not great. And again, all these numbers are here. I'm not making them up out of thin air. So let's do this. Arguably, two things happened in the last 2 years. Let's just be fair. Hollywood was so caught up in their own sermonizing and their own virtue signaling because, they had to, which slowed down production. And China was moving on fairly aggressively in their own industry, as they often do once they essentially acquire all the tools that they need. They just stopped accepting American films. 73 to very few. You can see it. Here's the numbers. And ironically, for a similar reason as to why US audiences and others have stopped going to see those same films, China just said these aren't good enough. They violate our principles, our morality, whatever, the regulators would say. And this is where I'm kind of confused, because all of these numbers are telling us something, but the article is telling us something different. It seems like it's a little bit schizophrenic, right? You may read it differently, maybe, but to me, it seems like we hop from we don't need China to China better show us they care to we want big China money again. That seems familiar. It's like almost like the girl that broke up with the guy because he said a mean thing, and then he moved on, and now she wants him back. Kind of what I think is happening here. I think China sees, I think Hollywood sees that they need the Chinese box office pretty desperately right now. 20% drop because of inflation and total butts in the seats. Films are costing more. Hollywood needs China. And graphically, you can actually see that the numbers of the US films hitting the Middle Kingdom overall has fallen. Like I said, 73 to very few. And it's a curve that many in industry has seen in its own unique way when you get in bed with the CCP and, when they kick you to the curb. Schuler Moore is a partner with Greenberg and Gluster. They're a high power law firm. And Schuler has actually handled many Hollywood and China deals when it comes to films. And actually pretty much suggests the obvious, which I tend to agree with. And I quote, "The last thing China wants to do is help Hollywood or the US by allowing US films into China. China's policies have nothing to do with money and everything to do with power," end quote. Who does that sound like here recently? The way this article is framed, and of course, we already know who framed it, and probably why. It sounds like a plea for Hollywood to find a way back into the good graces of China, and yet still keep a canon of agenda garbage firmly aimed or keenly aimed at a US audience. I don't know how you do both things. It's at least also clear that Hollywood may have awoken from their drug-induced coma long enough to pull back on the China-centric film mechanism, or maybe they're regretting that they did. I don't know. Two sides of the same coin. If enough of the insiders that Scotty knows are correct, maybe China isn't a barometer for releases or even green light statuses of like the tentpole films going forward. That's an interesting take as well. Strangely enough, that actually may not be good news for Americans if they decide to not let China have any influence over what they make. Because, we probably won't get good films then, just more agenda garbage. I guess one hill at a time, though. But hey, I've gone on long enough. What do you think? Do you think that the crooks in Hollywood are right to question the results of their China experiment from 2012 to today? Do you think that China will continue to limit the number of films it brings in from Hollywood? Well, I think that's pretty clear. They're going to keep doing that. And do you think that China is actually so much of a powder keg right now, it really isn't going to matter? And it may not even be worth bothering anymore? Because there's a lot of stuff going on over there. I don't know. anyway, feel free to comment down below. Tell me what you think. Let me know if you're excited by, I'm sorry I lost you letter that Scott put here, or Hollywood put here. I don't know. Somebody put it here. And it's kind of embarrassing. Anyway, just let me know what you think. Use the comments section down below, and hopefully we can have a conversation about it. And as always, support independent creators here on the platform, because they absolutely do deserve your time and your support. It's the only way that they're going to be able to grow. It's the only way I can grow. So if you're leaving comments, if you're hitting the like button, if you're subscribed, if you turn on the notifications bell, if you participate in any of these things and share out the content, you're gonna help the creators you care about become more influential. And that's kind of how it works with something that's algorithmically driven, like all the video platforms I'm on. And of course, with that, then a video the same way I always do. Be sure to take care of yourself, take care of others, wash your hands, of course, because it's good hygiene. And until next time, bye. And don't forget to check out my Rumble at rumble.com/CultureCasino.
Thanks for visiting today. Be sure you're subscribed and hit that for alerts.
Yay!
Of course, like and share all of the videos that you can, as it helps with the algorithm. Have a great day.